Well, good morning. My name is Jonathan Chatfield. I'm the Head of Railway Strategy and Policy at Rail Delivery Group, and I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to chair this webinar this morning. So the webinar that you've joined is Delivering Station Development that Unlocks Widespread Growth and New Property Opportunities. And then also we'll be looking at how to maximise our station investment to increase commercial and regeneration value. Quite a long title, but there's a lot that we will be unpacking within the next hour. I'm delighted we'll be looking at placemaking, looking at delivery models of how those go about, how you pull those together, and also then sustainability, the important area of sustainability and the kind of whole contractual side of it as well. So we've got a lot to cover. Really pleased that we've got three excellent speakers, presenters this morning. Gary McDonald, I'll come to first, who's the Programme Manager for Essex County Council with a lot of experience that he's got. Then to Sam Uren, who is an Engineering Director at SLC. And then our third speaker this morning will be Anne-Marie Friel, who's a partner at Pinsent Mason. So they bring three different perspectives to this whole topic that we'll be looking at today. There will be plenty of opportunity at the end for asking questions and having a discussion. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. Please do use the Q&A function for that. So even as we're going through the presentations, if things come up that you would like to explore, just type in a question as we go, because that saves us at the end waiting for those questions to come in. So feel free to put those questions in as we go through, because that'll help us as we get to a good discussion that I want to have at the end of the presentations. But each of our speakers have got about 10 minutes just to run through a few slides and to get you thinking about what questions you'd like to ask. But yeah, really pleased that you've been able to join us this morning for this. And this is also a bit of a taster, and I'll say a bit more about this at the end, to a conference that we'll be holding at the end of June, which will be an in-person conference looking at rail station development and regeneration. So this is the online version midway through the year, and then we'll have an opportunity to come together at the end of June. But I'll tell you more about that later in the session. So first of all, Gary McDonald is Programme Manager for Essex County Council. Gary's got a lot of experience on transport generation programmes, been involved with Bewley Park, I know, on the Great Eastern Main Line, and got a lot of experience even outside of rail. Victoria and Albert Museum, I know, been involved with Southend regeneration as well. So a lot of experience. And Gary, we're delighted to hand the floor to you and look forward to what you've got to say to us. So Gary, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, and thanks for everybody for joining today. As Jonathan said, my name is Gary McDonald. I'm the Programme Manager at Essex County Council. I manage the large-scale infrastructure programmes and investment that's around transportation, mainly funded through the Housing Infrastructure Fund from Homes England that some of you may be well aware of. In terms of Bewley Park Station, I was the client-side project manager. So I've worked on the project for about 11 years. It opened in October 2025, but when I originally came on board, it was around bringing in the funding, trying to locate funding opportunities, and managing the bidding and process to bring in the funding. And then once the funding's in place, managing the interfaces with our funders, and then acting as a client-side project manager for Essex County Council, managing our risk exposure, etc., around the building of the station. So, sorry, can I have the next slide, please? So really what we were trying to do with Bewley Park Station, we're working with Chelmsford City Council. So within Essex County Council is the upper tier authority responsible for transportation, working very closely with Chelmsford City Council, who are the district council responsible for delivery of housing and local plan, etc. So we were working together to basically bring about the conditions to allow housing growth. So as we go through this presentation, this is not about building a station. The station is there really to enable the growth of the northeast area of Chelmsford, which is an area of rapid growth. It's about delivering the investment, allowing the housing to come out of the ground, and not just housing, also businesses as well. There's substantial business park being developed in the area. The vision of North East Chelmsford is one of a garden community, which I'm sure a lot of you on the call will have heard on numerous occasions. It's about a garden community, a sense of place, housing development with infrastructure, with business supported. Next slide, please. Very briefly, what was delivered? A 3-platform station. It wasn't just a station, though. It was a multimodal interchange, as it says there. There is a bus station with bus interchange, I should say, with 8 bays. Good pedestrian and cycle links, lots of secure cycle facilities, well planned within the site, so that whichever way you access the station, you don't have to cross on your bike across busy car parks or busy interchange areas. You get to your area to park your bike and lock it up securely without having to go through busy areas. There's taxi rank, lots of car parking spaces, and the station itself is really it was really impressive and very proud to be part of it. We didn't do a great deal of value engineering on it. We kept the waiting rooms, we kept all the retail units, we kept all the coverage on the platforms as well, and very pleased to deliver something that actually we didn't sort of cut back to the bone. And I think that's quite important if you're looking at a sense of place and actually a facility that the community can be proud of. So next slide, please. So this is the nub of the matter. Why is it needed? Well, thousands of houses being built. They were coming out of the ground before the station was built, was in place. We had about 2,000 to 5,000 homes coming up without the station in place, and the development was capped at 2,500 without proper transport mitigations in place. Everybody agreed that the new station was the absolute ideal in terms of those mitigations. Other mitigations would have included running more frequent buses into Chelmsford or to other nearby stations. Not ideal, and I'll come on to reasons in a second why that would be the case. But so the station was delivered alongside the housing coming out, and as I said, it's not just housing. There's schools, new primary, secondary schools, business parks, country parks, etc. So there's a whole sense of place there that this station supports, and not just supports, but actually drives. Next slide, please. Again, it's a key part. It's infrastructure-led development, which is very, very important. Getting the timing of infrastructure when looking at in conjunction with housing is very, very difficult. Elsewhere, we've put Essex County Council have put in infrastructure that's gone in well in advance of housing, and been criticised for doing that, with the housing perhaps being delayed through the planning process. So, but this wasn't the case. That the housing was starting to come up, and transport mitigation was absolutely needed. There's a slide there that shows some of the other highway-related infrastructure that was developed and or is currently being developed that supports the overall garden community. So it's not just a station. There's other stuff going on as well, as I'm sure you would expect. Briefly down there, the cost. Still working out the final cost and final accounts with contractors, but it's in that 189 million range, and the funding. The primary funder was Housing Infrastructure Fund through Homes England. But we did have Section 106, which allowed the early stages of design to be done, whilst we tried to bring the bulk of the funding through as another contribution from what was the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, SELEP, which is no longer. Next slide, please. So the strategic case, when you're building a station like this on the Great Eastern Main Line, everybody needs to get something from it, particularly when you're dealing with lots of different funders. What did Essex County Council get from it? Well, it got a benefit of reduced congestion within Chelmsford's city centre, reduced car journeys, reduced reliance on the highway network in and around Chelmsford. What did Chelmsford get from it? Well, it gets a spread of journeys that allows people coming into Chelmsford to use the various leisure facilities, shopping, etc., to have a better experience. And what did the rail industry get? Well, what it got was it got resilience on the Great Eastern Main Line. A 3-platform station, 3 lines running through. So previously, it was literally 1 up, 1 down line running through. As a result of the project, we were able to put in an additional line, a passing loop. It adds resilience onto the Great Eastern Main Line. It allows faster trains to overtake slower trains, so that freight trains, the sort of non-stopping passenger services, there's just greater resilience. So everybody got something from this project, and that is actually quite important when you're pulling together a business case of this nature. Next slide, please. Very quickly, these are the people that are involved. Obviously, I've mentioned the funders. We went through Network Rail to do the management of the project. There are various models that a local authority promoting a station can use to develop a station. We thought it was best to go through Network Rail, employ them, and get them to do the engineering side, the procurement side, etc. There are other models available. Local authorities are free to use any of the large engineering firms that are out there to develop stations. Having gone through the process, obviously other authorities will have other issues that perhaps come into play, but I wouldn't have changed that model at all. That was definitely right for us in terms of getting Network Rail to do it, and us managing Network Rail and managing our exposure and managing the funders. Murphy's were the principal contractor that were appointed by Network Rail. Next slide, please. Again, just sort of coming back to the whole sort of placemaking agenda. The station is well connected. It is close to the road network. We don't necessarily want people to travel by car. We would much rather people travel by bus or cycle or walk, but some of those journeys are perhaps not practical. So we do have a lot of car parking spaces, but yeah, it's about making sure that this station is fully integrated in every way possible with the local community. It's again part of this placemaking objective that we've got, that it becomes a bit of a community hub. And it will do as the houses get developed and start to move closer into the station. At the moment, the station is slightly removed from the housing, but as I say, as the planning permissions come through and those houses go up, then it will very much become part of the community and part of and fully integrated within that garden community. Next slide, please. It's important to consider the lessons learned. There's lots of things on there. If you're developing infrastructure projects, people on the call, you'll all be well aware these are complex with lots of different partners, lots of different governance, lots of different decisions. And that really does feed back into the point I made earlier about the need for everybody to get something from a project of this nature. It was a complex funding model in the end, and Essex, as the promoter, did hold significant cost risk. It held cost risk in 2 areas. Firstly, the capital risk. If costs soared and went above budget, Essex County Council was funder of last resort, so would have to fund any shortfall. We didn't necessarily. We relied on Network Rail to do the procurement and go into contract with the main contractor. But if costs soared and escalated, then Essex were holding the credit card to pay off all those bills. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And also as well, if anybody on the call has been involved in promoting railway stations, you will be aware that the DfT do expect the promoter of the station to take on operational cost risk, which means that if a station does not break even or makes a loss for the rail industry, DfT would expect that revenue cost to be covered until such a point as the station breaks even. So it's a really important point for people to consider. I think Essex, it was quite a brave decision to take on those risks, but so far that decision is definitely paying off. We were helped by Project Speed. For those that can recall, it was something that came out of the pandemic with a reduced sort of admin red tape burden to get projects moving quicker. We certainly benefited from that. Again, the main risks in terms of the constructions of the project were around possessions, weekend possessions and Christmas possessions. And they were very nervous times for us as a council, and for me as a sort of client-side project manager, trying to, we were totally really out of control. We were reliant on Network Rail, contractor and train operating companies, but thankfully they all went well. And the final point is the main point here. Long-term thinking and perseverance is essential in getting a project to this point. And really what I would add to that is it's about not losing the focus on what you're trying to do. As I said earlier, I'm talking about building a train station, but that wasn't the end point. That isn't the end point. The end point is building out the Further Garden community and the station supporting that. So you can't really lose that focus. Next slide, please. Yeah, just to come back, long time in the making, plans in 2010. It opened, it says they're expected to open in winter 2025, just shows I haven't updated that slide properly. It opened on the 26th of October 2025 and is now fully operational. But it's just to get, that was a 15-year journey from start to finish. And really the third bullet point down that I've put in bold is simply that was the key point. That's when we pulled all of the funding together and were really able to sort of go and really press go on it. Next slide, please. So thank you for your time this morning. Obviously happy to take any questions within the Q&A, but key point from me, infrastructure is difficult. It's very, very difficult to build out. It's complex, but it requires a perseverance. It requires a focus and working with people we don't build infrastructure. We don't build roads or rail just for the sheer sake of it. We build it to support something. And I think it's about keeping all our partners eyes on the prize and making sure everybody keeps focused on what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Gary, thank you very much indeed. Really impressive project. Really good to hear about Bewley Park and to see those photos as well. And as you say, we often on these calls talk about schemes that are in development or still to come. Great to actually see a scheme like that where you've actually got through and opened the station and can talk positively as you did about the process. As you say, we're going to run each of the three presentations one after the other and then do questions. So please do keep those questions coming in using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. But thank you for that, Gary. We're going to move on. Sam Uren is next. Sam is Engineering Director at SLC. Sam's a company director there, responsibility for engineering, for HR and marketing. Chartered civil engineer, fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I believe you've got 30 years experience as well of managing schemes and station regeneration like this. So really delighted that you can join us today, Sam, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jonathan, and really great to be here. My name's Sam Uren. I work for SLC, and SLC, I want to thank Worcestershire County Council, who asked us to present today on behalf of them to talk about Worcestershire Parkway. Thank you, Maxine. So why Worcestershire Parkway? Worcestershire Parkway was actually delivered some 6 years ago during the pandemic, actually. So some real parallels with Bewley Park as well today. But unlike Bewley Park, Worcestershire County Council took the brave decision to actually deliver this themselves, and SLC represented Worcestershire as client representative. Next slide, please. Just to talk a little bit about SLC, you might need to know who we are. and why we're presenting today. We've worked for the last 17 years in the rail industry, helping third parties, that's people like local authorities, deliver rail schemes for themselves. We've opened 15 stations and we've actually got 8 new stations on their way, 7 of which are going to be this year, 5 on the West Midlands Combined Authority schemes, and then 2 additional stations, because we've already opened some stations on the Northumberland line, working on behalf of Northumberland County Council. So we are very much in the domain of helping support local authorities and other even private developers delivering rail stations and working with the rail industry. Next slide, please. So why should we talk about Worcestershire Parkway? It opened in February 2020, literally 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. Despite that, it's had great great passenger numbers. In 2025, as you can see, the extract from the LEP report, the Worcestershire LEP report, showed that actually at year 5, we were at year 13 levels of the business case. So I don't know whether that actually reflects the way business cases are written nowadays, but it also reflects the real development that's happened around Worcestershire Parkway, not the real take up in the service of Worcestershire Parkway. The build it and they will come philosophy. My MD recently said it doesn't take a genius to work out that if you put an infrastructure node at the bottom of somebody's garden, then that garden's going to be worth a lot more money than it would be if it wasn't. And so now we're using Worcestershire Parkway as a real guiding example. It's been referenced in the New Towns Task Force, and a real opportunity for the government to capitalise on existing transport infrastructure in its strategic location. And as you can see there, the visual extract of Wychhaven Town, which is growing up around Worcestershire Parkway now, of open spaces, residential development, employment development, and a real opportunity. 10,000 houses are now planned around Worcestershire Parkway, and new businesses are now seeking planning permission around that station as well. So you can see, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the station and why it's so successful, and some of the lessons learnt. It's 6 years on. What can we use from this station? Just to say, on that little map there, that you can see Worcestershire Parkway just outside Worcestershire, it was developed as a parkway station with 550 car parking spaces. It's about 2 miles off the M5, so nice and easily accessible for Worcestershire residents. And because of the station location, which is actually located on two different lines, there's access to London, Birmingham, Manchester, Bristol, Cardiff, and onward connectivity. So the connectivity is really important as well, where you're locating your station in terms of connectivity. So next slide, please. Got a lot to get through in like 10 minutes. So Worcestershire Parkway has helped us create our own approach to transport infrastructure and how you build towns around it. I think Gary's already reflected on this, but communities are at the heart of everything that we're doing. How you create those nodes and ensure that the community is formed and feeds into your strategic fit while you're doing it. Working out the land assembly, and then looking at the infrastructure development, the delivery support, how you deliver the project, and very importantly at the end, how it's going to operate, because that's actually the product that you're producing. It's not the station building itself, it's the operation, and the connectivity is the key outcome that you are trying to achieve. Next slide, please. So this is actually a graphic image of the station, which isn't too dissimilar to that very first slide. This was formed during the feasibility study, and it actually looks very, very similar to what's actually on site. But it started being talked about over 20 years ago. So strategically, it really worked. One of the challenges was there wasn't money within the rail industry to actually support this station. So one of the things SLC worked very closely with Worcestershire was how could this be funded? And it was actually financed and funded through deeds and agreements with the DfT and with the train operators about how the car park revenue and the train operator payments to stop at the station would actually fund the station. And Worcestershire County Council took the brave decision of taking out prudential borrowing themselves from central government, and that's paid back through that TOC revenue and the car park revenue. So very unique model, not dissimilar to other models that have been used, but very unique to that particular location. So really brave of Worcestershire to take the financial risks themselves and then deliver the station themselves. We also needed to develop that strategic narrative that Gary talked about and the business case in order to secure that funding. Next slide, please. One of the most important things is engagement with the right people. That's our very lovely Marek, who was construction manager on behalf of Worcestershire, working alongside GWR's regional manager. They became very good pals over this project. So Great Western Railways regional manager and bringing the station into use. So we already acknowledge it's about the community, but operation is the end product. And despite positive relationships with GWR, with Network Rail, there's a lot of lessons that we've learned off the delivery of a third-party rail scheme, particularly at Worcestershire Parkway. Next slide, please. So some consolidated learning for future stations. By the way, I love that picture on the far right there of the us reaching half a million passenger journeys, because that picture doesn't just represent the 500,000 passenger journeys, but if you look in the picture, all those people were involved in the delivery of the station, and a lot of those people aren't rail people, they're local community people, so it's fantastic to see. And that was such a great day that we really enjoyed together. I think some learning for future stations, which we're definitely applying to a lot of our future work, is understand the local plan, the strategic intent of the station and the connective travel. Worcestershire Parkway was developed as a parkway station. And what that means is that we built Worcestershire Parkway as a parkway station to connect people and their cars, and now what is happening is a town is being built up around it. So the strategic intent of the station needs to be very, very clear. Why is the purpose? And it can change, as it has done at Worcestershire Parkway. It has very much changed. Utilising and developing community space is really important. Despite some of the challenges with engaging with the rail industry, we've managed to include beehives at the station. There's a piano there as well. There's artistic work. And we weren't able to get a coffee shop inside the station due to a lot of the regulations and the restrictions in terms of financing it. But we were able to get a coffee cart outside the station as well. So a lot of people are very grateful for that. But again, utilising and designing the community space and trying to get that working is something that we would like to do better in the future. Understanding the ownership of the land surrounding the development is really important as well. One of the key things that we found out only later, that the developers took options on the land around the station when we got planning permission. Now, it's very obvious nowadays that why they would do that, and it is something that happens. And what we could have done in those early days is harness their housing developer appetite and how they could have supported and helped finance or fund the scheme. And we've been looking at that on other projects as well. And I won't talk about Northumberland Line, but it's been utilised very successfully on Northumberland Line. The other thing that we're immensely proud of is in February 2025, which is 5 years after the station was built, the station became carbon neutral, as in the amount of carbon that was created by building the station was mitigated through modal shift from car to rail. So that means now this station is now contributing to net zero across the UK by taking cars off the road and getting people travelling. So that's really exciting for me, and how we can play that narrative out in terms of developing, our towns of the future. I've actually just read my next slide ahead of myself. I'm quite impressed with myself there. So finally, sorry to just go back, Maxine, just finally, creating a new town round a transport node feels like a no-brainer to all of us, I'm absolutely sure. The three areas that we are focusing in on is very much connecting with the community. How do you get local government to support it, whether that be through local transport plans or even local housing plans, etc. And more importantly, in today's society where we're a bit struggling for money, how do we get investors and developers to support these valuable projects that we know bring value to the land around it? Thank you very much.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Again, as with the first presentation, really great to hear about a project like that, and something that obviously opened a few years ago, but you can talk, the way you did around the impact that it's had on the local area and the way in which the project came together. So really great presentation. Thank you for that. Our third and final presenter this morning is Anne-Marie Friel. Anne-Marie is a partner at Pinsent Masons, construction and infrastructure contract specialist lawyer. Really important to have someone who knows how to pull all these things together from a contractual perspective. I know, Anne-Marie, you've also got a passion and interest in sustainability and been involved in things around climate change and net zero infrastructure as well. So Anne-Marie, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. I'll just wait because I think we're going to share slides there. Very good. Really nice to be here. And as Jonathan has outlined, I've been working as an infrastructure projects lawyer for many years, but for the purposes of today, that means that I focus on contracts. So if you took that nice tiered level structure that Sam just went through, I'd be on the fourth tier, which is project delivery. I won't tell you how many years I've been working on that. So we're going to look at three things today. Firstly, I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro, basically, into some of the PPP delivery structures for local development. And I can see already that I'm just trying to click these slides. There we go. Yeah, I can see already that we've had some questions around PPP models. So great. I didn't set that one up, but thank you for whoever put that question in. Secondly, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background into sustainability challenges very broadly, but also focusing on why the contracts are important. And thirdly, I'm going to give you a very straightforward contractual blueprint that you can use to really for any contract to help make sure that you improve the sustainability outcomes. Sorry, I'm just having a little bit of issues here with here we go. So we'll start with this intro to sustainability models. There are many approaches that can be used when it comes to what I'm going to call very broadly PPP models for local development. And if you can take one thing away, it's this: there is no one size fits all. It is absolutely nuanced. It is absolutely dependent on the specific project and the facts, the aims and objectives, the key features of the clients involved, of the stakeholders involved, any particular constraints that might apply to that project. And for every single development that you do, this is going to require an extremely careful analysis, and different options are going to emerge as the right solutions. Any local authority who wants to progress one of these projects is going to need specialist advice around this. Just out of interest, at Pinsent Masons, we've actually got a dedicated team who focus on local authority delivery structures. They've been doing it for over 25 years. And I think the last I heard, we've helped deliver more than 200 projects. I'm going to very broadly summarize the available models. Bear with me here, because for illustrative purposes, I am being extremely broad brush. The reality, as a typical lawyer answer, is much more complicated. I know some of you attending today might actually be quite experienced in some of these, and you'll have all sorts of issues, you'll have all sorts of detailed knowledge of different issues on different projects. But I think we just need to talk broadly here, because every project is so nuanced and there are actually crossovers between these different categories. But I'm just going to go through them really broadly And what I'm not talking about here is a full DBFO model, because that hasn't really what's been used for local development in the UK in recent years. I'm not saying that it won't be in future. Let's start with contractual JVs. This is the only one of the 4 models for which there is no legal entity. It's just a contract. There's huge variation in what could be covered by a contractual joint venture. You might use this if, for example, there was something preventing a local authority from setting up a separate entity, a body corporate. There may be constraints that apply to a local authority. And actually, at its most simple, a development agreement could actually be seen as a kind of contractual joint venture. Secondly, we've got investment partnerships. This is a separate legal entity which is set up between the public sector and the private sector. It can vary hugely from a platform for the parties to agree to work together on a pipeline of opportunities, right through to an agreement to invest in very specific opportunities. Thirdly, we have our master development partnership, and this is a partnership for a development which is typically focused on raising the value of the land. That's the way I think I would think about that one. And fourthly, we have what I'm going to call the integrated one-stop shop partnership. And what's unique about these ones is that they include within the scope of the partnership a plan for integrated delivery of all or part of the works or services. But typically we see it as a partnership with an integrated construction partner who's going to deliver some of the works. Now, regardless of the structure that you use, there are certain issues that are going to be common to all 4 of these structures that you're going to need to work your way through. Let's start with procurement. Application of the procurement rules is going to depend on the facts. It is always going to require a full regulatory analysis. We sometimes hear in the market this referred to as the difference between on-market, i.e. something that's taken through the procurement process, or off-market, which is something which perhaps is in an earlier stage and hasn't gone through the procurement process yet. Secondly, you've got to think about the structure of any equity or debt, which is going to be invested by the private sector parties during the development or by the public sector party. And thirdly, we've got to understand, where are these opportunities? Is it just a collaboration which has been entered into in order to help select and define the opportunity, at least in the early stages? Or is it something where there's actually already been very specific opportunities and sites identified for development, in which case it will look and feel a bit different? And as I said, no one size fits all. I may get very specific questions, but I shall refuse to be drawn on recommendations of either, because it really does depend on the facts. Just before I move on to the next session, I want to pick up on some of the things that Gary raised, actually, about station development. Whenever you're dealing with operational railway assets, this brings you into a regulated world that you cannot ignore. And Gary, I thought you outlined this so well in your example. It is subject to pretty hardcore regulation around safety and other factors, and this absolutely impacts the approach that you take. Now, I've been working on transport projects for many years, from the sort of supersonically big ones like Crossrail and HS2 through to sort of London developments where it sort of is an adjunct to a station entrance. But in every project which touches the railway, this is an issue. And it's interesting because if you are on this call and you haven't done a lot of station development, you might just feel this slight nervousness. And I see, Gary, that you were talking about being so nervous about possessions. I completely understand that. But of course, in your case, Network Rail and Murphy, this is what they do, right? This is what they're absolutely specialised in. This is everyday work for them. So I just thought that your delivery structure there, given that you were delivering a whole station, getting Network Rail to do, I thought that was actually pretty spot on. It'd be quite tricky for somebody like Essex to try and do that themselves without that specialist input and that kind of operational understanding of the possessions process. This is going to impact lots of different things. It's going to impact your approach to your suppliers, third-party agreements, insurance, design approval, and there are actually a lot of different Network Rail agreements which exist. There's like a basic services agreement, basic asset protection agreement, asset protection agreements. These are not things that you can pick and choose. These are things that you do have to get comfortable with. And what I would recommend that you do is that you build this into your strategy from the beginning. And I just realized this is a slightly older version of these slides, so ignore that. So let's move on to the second issue, which is just some background on sustainability challenges and why it is important for contracts. Why does it matter? Well, I know that everybody on this call is fully aware of PAS 2080, of course. You all know about the importance of the systems-based approach when it comes to sustainability. We always need to look at the interdependencies and the components which influence the system when we're trying to achieve sustainable delivery of infrastructure. And actually, this is what contracts do. Contracts are a tool for regulating organizational, commercial, and behavioral dynamics around achieving a desired outcome. That's exactly what contracts are intended to do. Whenever you advise on a contract, what you're trying to do is to take into account all of the components that could affect the achievement of the outcome, and you try to ensure that everything is aligned as best as it could be. Do you know what lawyers call that? We call that advising on risks. You also need to understand all of the, I'll go back one. You also need to understand all of the different interconnecting components of construction in particular that affect sustainability. Make sure that we're dealing with all of them through the contract, not just focusing on one or two. I've outlined here just some areas. This is by no means all, but these will be familiar to many of you. They'll be coming up already in your planning consents. But all of these require active behavioural change, right? They're all in areas of some of your technical expertise, but all of these are going to be highly relevant to the delivery phase of the projects. And that's not all. We do have other challenges to deal with. Go back here, slightly sensitive. We're trying to do all of this at a time where we've got a massive skills crisis. We're trying to predict an uncertain future, particularly the impact of future regulation on the environments we work in now, and the concept, and also the impact of future regulation on the concept of value. I mean, we have signed up to a net zero future. What is that going to do when that becomes law? What is that going to do to the value of your assets in the future? Also, thinking about, if we know what best practice is now, but we choose not to apply it, what does that mean in future? And I think we've got some really good lessons learned here with fire safety and what's been going on with fire safety and how it has impacted decisions that were made in the very retrospective past. We're also worried about the availability and cost of new materials. We're worried about new ways of working, and also how do they perform compared to the traditional way of doing things. And we also need to be able to capture the future improvement that we know is coming and not only focus on what's available today. So we need to sort of lock in this commitment to innovation. Of course, it can't be ignored because there are forces at work, and excuse all the messing around with the slides. I think I've got heavy fingers or something. We touched a little bit on planning consents. There's so much activity in this area. We've got whole life carbon assessments, biodiversity impact, sustainability being intensively tested through our planning and consenting processes. And this is leading to conditions, very specific conditions being attached to developments. And these conditions must be complied with during the delivery of the development, or you would be in breach of your planning consent. We've also got funding arrangements, and funders to projects are increasingly looking for what I'm going to call sustainable developments to invest in. And one of the ways that this is going to manifest on your project is through the requirement to comply with different accreditation frameworks. And there's a range of accreditation frameworks, but there's also regulation emerging, such as the EU taxonomy regulations, which contains a very standardized approach to the assessment of a sustainable development. And if you have funders, for example, which have EU kind of headquarters, this might be the kind of framework that they're looking at. So what's the contractual blueprint that I recommend? It's all very straightforward. It's a small slide, but I am going to go through it in detail, so don't stress. 3 things: we specify, we innovate, and then we manage. And as I said, we are going to go through each in more detail, starting with how do we specify? Well, beginning at the tender stage, we need to be very clear in the minimum requirements for compliance. We look at those things that I talked about in the previous slide, the planning conditions, the funding conditions, the promises that stakeholders have made. Secondly, we understand that effective requirements must be clear, they must be specific, they cannot be vague and aspirational. You would be surprised at how often this happens. We think about the consequences of failure to meet those requirements and acknowledge that a normal remedy, contractual remedy or defects or damages might not actually be effective because of construction in itself generates carbon. So actually is doing more construction to rectify a carbon defect really going to help? And crucially, and this is one that isn't always obvious to people, we don't over-specify unless we have to. We don't include broad sweeping obligations which are not specific to that supplier, because if we do that, what's going to happen is that they're going to get ignored and they will not be achieved. And I know it sounds strange, but it's actually going to be counterproductive. So let's look at how we innovate. And there's different ways to do this, but I'm just going to go through a few. Firstly, we engage early. We engage early because we want to be forecasting performance on sustainability outcomes as early as tender stage. We want to be selecting bidders who really understand how to do this, what needs to be done. And we do want to be clear with our bidders on what the KPIs are going to be. Once we're in contract, we then align commercial success for those bidders and those contractors to achieving these outcomes. And we look to drive ongoing improvement, ongoing innovation. And we do that by creating spaces and forums for collaboration to happen. We use linked objectives across our supply chain to align all the stakeholder interests around the same common sustainability outcomes. But it's not good enough to just tell people that they have to do it. We need to manage as well. So I'll just deal with that. Different ways of managing again. I'll go through some of the ways that I would recommend it. I would create gateways within the delivery process for positive intervention. Design and planning stage is an absolutely key opportunity to influence before construction commences. You then need to check in at regular intervals to see how is that implementation working in practice. Does it need tweaking? And remember what I said, kind of more traditional defects rectification might not really be an appropriate remedy here. For example, if you're not in compliance with your planning condition. We report regularly, huge fan of contemporaneous reporting on this, and we need to understand the importance of data. And this data may be needed on biodiversity impact as well as on carbon. I think carbon reporting is perhaps more commonly understood. You've got to think about how does this reporting drive decision making? How does it drive intervention? How do we manage contemporaneously? How do we manage intensely? Plans need to be reported. Plans need to be updated in real time. Decisions on the project, such as variations, need to take into account these sustainability outcomes. And I would say, perhaps controversially, that incentives on contractors should take effect immediately, because that's the best way to drive current behaviour. If you just wait till the end, it's not going to be as effective. So that's me, and I am looking forward to the questions later, Jonathan, but over to you to manage that.
Anne-Marie, thank you very much indeed. 3 very different presentations, that really great to get that different perspective, and yeah, great to have someone who is able to advise on those risks and those models as you just described. So thank you very much for that. Right, we have been getting some questions in the Q&A, so really appreciate that. Some of them are being answered sort of typed and live, so you can actually look at those on the answered questions. We've got a few there that we're also going to come to now. I wonder if, Sam, I might start with you. You'll be pleased to see you had a positive endorsement for the station itself, saying it's used it and it's brilliant. But a question as well about the model, obviously using the finance, design, build, maintain model for the Parkway station. Comments on model, and then I'll go to the other panel members as well, just very quickly. We haven't got a lot of time, but quick thoughts on which model to adopt and pros and cons.
I was going to try and wrap up those 2 questions together, actually, if that's okay.
Yep, go for it.
So the first question about the station, bringing investors and developers, have we got any examples that are working successfully? Well, I briefly mentioned Northumberland Line, which I think you can just see here the station being developed on Northumberland Line. And what we're using, what we've been using on Northumberland Line and has been created by the investment gurus within SLC is a land value capture model where we've actually, I think it's around 20 to 30% of this scheme is actually funded through deeds of land value capture. It's a pioneering scheme in the UK in the way that the funding was developed, and getting that support then enabled the DFT to have a lot more confidence around the scheme and invest in the scheme. And as you will no doubt have seen in the press, to great effect. In fact, the number of planning permissions going into Northumberland County Council for developing land around there does reflect on the success of that project in creating towns around there. Just out of interest for people, you know, when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about people who are living in the mining communities off the Northumberland coastline, who now can get into Newcastle within 20 to 30 minutes, whereas before it took them about an hour and a half by car if they had a car. So real economic, wider growth, value added growth within the area. So again, using the funding model invented by those gurus to actually help deliver and develop a scheme pioneering on Northumberland Line. The other question that came up was about Warwickshire. We're actually working very closely with Warwickshire. We have done for 17 years. In fact, our very first station that we developed in partnership with them was Stratford upon Avon Parkway, delivered for, I think it was £7 million we built that station for. One of the first third-party projects supported by Warwickshire County Council. And I apologise, Anne-Marie, I did shake my head when I said that the right model is always to hand it over to Network Rail. Not necessarily the case, as you alluded to.
Certainly,
horses for courses. Horses
different
for courses.
models. Yeah,
exactly.
Models.
Different models work for different local authorities, and absolutely, and we're great supporters of that third party model, because we do see real benefits in you controlling the risk and controlling everything as a third party. So but yeah, we work alongside Warwickshire, and they are very, very seasoned with working with the rail industry and developing these funding models. Stratford upon Avon Parkway was funded by central government. However, they've done a number of schemes since. I think we've worked on 5 stations with them throughout the years. And Rugby Parkway model is really interesting. I can't give you too much information about it because we're involved on the Warwickshire side, but it is a very unique model, and it's quite exciting for our investment guys within SLC. So yeah, if people have got ideas about wanting to invest in the railway, then that's definitely something that we can support and help on. I think that covers me off those 2 questions, doesn't it?
No, that's great. Thank you. Anne-Marie, do you want to come in on anything more on the model side? I know you very much made that point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the PPP model is about revenue generation primarily for the local authority, and that's going to be, you know, that revenue generation is essential, obviously, to get the private sector to invest. So I don't know anything about the Warwickshire model. I see the in-market engagement, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that. You know, we're not sort of talking about old-fashioned PFI. We're talking about much more sort of nuanced and I would say flexible PPP models. And, you know, the right model for any project is just going to depend on so many different factors. It is complicated, I think it's fair to say, and very sensitive to pressures.
Great, thank you. Gary, do you want to come in on the models quickly? Your experience?
Happy to. Yeah, Jonathan, thank you. I mean, as I said in my presentation, we used Network Rail and think to develop everything out for us, and I wouldn't have gone back and done anything differently around that. But as I said, also accept that there's going to be different things work for different authorities depending on what the pressures are. But certainly, as Anne-Marie said, you know, the whole processes, once you're in the rail processes, it's a whole new world of legislation and administration and governance. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't have rowed back from what we decided to do.
Thank you. And Anne-Marie, can I come back to you? There's a question here on the blueprint that you mentioned towards the end. Yeah, so areas where that worked particularly well?
Timing is interesting. When I talked about these conditions going into planning consents, this is happening now. This is it's still, I would say, relatively new when you actually think about it. So there's obviously a big time delay given the length of time that construction periods take. So we're starting to see this stuff go in, but it would be an absolute, I don't think anyone could tell you that they really understand yet what it would look like to have embodied carbon defect failures and things like that, because it's just a little bit early in the cycle. But we are using this structure, and if anybody, I don't know if anyone here is used to contract forms. There's a contract form called the NEC contract, which is used almost exclusively by local authorities in the UK. They, the government is a big fan of the NEC model, and they have a clause called X29, which is for climate change, but you can change it to be more generally for sustainability. And actually, I've done an analysis. I have actually been published in an academic paper on this, doing an analysis of that, and the X29 clause does meet all of the requirements of the blueprint. We are just going to market on a very large transport project in Europe at the moment, which is also using this structure. But like I said, with the timing being as it is, remains to be seen. Actually, projects like, if I can say it, HS2 have actually, while they are being widely lambasted for lots of different reasons, actually carbon reduction is not one of them. So they've done very well, as far as I can tell, on reducing carbon in the project. So then we do have some good examples which are sort of in delivery. But I think this is going to be a really hot area. And I think if I had a crystal ball, I think the area of carbon defects is going to be a big area for the future.
Great, thank you. I mean, our time has literally flown by today. I'm going to just give each of you sort of 30 seconds at the end, just to kind of say what you feel kind of the general climate is for this whole sort of station generation economic growth. I mean, climate today, are you positive? Are you negative? Is there something very quickly you could mention that we should be doing more of in order to get more of this stuff happening? Just very quickly go around each of you for a final thoughts on where you generally are at the moment, what your sense and your mood is at the moment. Gary, I'm going to start with you.
Positive, I would say, generally positive, particularly with the changes in the rail industry around Great British Railways, and a lot more joining up in terms of the track and the stations. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that can lead to better integration. So that for me would be a positive for what we're talking about.
Great, thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. I think, yeah. I think the rail industry has a lot of challenges. We talked about process, and I don't know that that's going to go away for a good couple of years. We've got to get GBR through and things like that. So the rail industry itself is probably in a state of flux. However, what I'm really noticing, and what we've known for a long time, is the real narrative around how towns and development happens around these transport infrastructure nodes, and how do we capture that in financing and funding schemes. I think that's something that we've sort of talked about. We're starting to see real models going out there of that actually happening. And I'm quite excited for the future that actually people are starting to connect the two together. The government are connecting the two together through the New Towns Fund, through their planning, their national planning framework. And that's really exciting for us in terms of, we're not just I think Gary said it right at the beginning. We're not just building things because we want to build things. We're building things because it's bringing wider economic growth. It's bringing GVA uplift. It's improving people's lives. And as Anne-Marie said, it's reducing carbon.
Great, thank you. Anne-Marie, last word from you.
just there's going to be a huge amount of interest. There's a lot of money out there looking to invest in sustainable infrastructure, which can deliver reliable revenue opportunities, and there's a lot of private sector interest in working together with public sector on this. So I think just so many opportunities to collaborate and see what's possible.
Great. So my thanks to Anne-Marie, to Sam and to Gary for your time and your presentations this morning. That was excellent. Thank you again to Waterfront for organising this. And yeah, if you don't feel you've heard enough, then do please join us on the 30th of June, the Rail Station Development and Regeneration Conference. It'll be at Pinsent Masons in London, 30th of June. There'll be more details coming out on email. It'd be great to see you face to face at that, and an opportunity to continue some of the discussions that we've had today. But thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.